So as we awaken from this dream of death, we begin to see that all the discomfort and all the trouble and difficulty and the problems and the experiences that are taking place not as a result of the sense of separation from God, but actually as the cause of the separation from God. You see, it's our grievances that are keeping us in hell. And the response of the Course in Miracles is to say, the answer is to accept. Acceptance, it says, is all that can be asked of you. For what you are is certain. So we try to accept. And at the same time we're trying to accept, we're in the business of rejecting because we're holding on to grievances. And the grievance, you see, is the antithesis of acceptance because it's based on judgment, and all judgment is rejection, unquote. So we're trying to hold on to the grievance on one hand and let go and actually accept life in its real form, in its reality as benign on the other, and it's going to be completely and totally impossible until we allow ourselves to see that we have to allow a letting go within of the grievance. It's our grievances that are keeping us in hell. Now, it may seem that I'm putting a lot of emphasis on the idea of relinquishing our grievances, and the reason for me being so emphatic about it is because I can see very clearly that the grievance is what hides the light of the world in me. And more importantly, the letting go of the grievance allows that light to come in. And when that light comes in, it shines on what it is that I'm doing within. It shines on my own self-deception. It illuminates what it is that I was prepared to blind myself to in order to maintain the illusion of separation. What it is I was blinding myself to is this egoistic idea that there's juice in holding grievances. Yeah, actually it's vengeance, and it's juicy stuff is vengeance. That's the egoism. The problem was not that, but the fact that I identify with that, because that's not what I am. That egoism that says there's actually juice in allowing yourself to have a grievance against your brother is just simply a suggestion. And it's a suggestion that has no actual power or reality until we give it that. And in giving it that power, we condemn ourselves to hell. Now, when that light shines on that self-deception, and we acknowledge that self-deception, what that allows us to do is to see that letting go of grievances is not so difficult. But you can also see why it was so difficult when you thought that it had value. But when that value is eradicated, when you can see through it, then it becomes natural and easier to let go of the grievance. It then becomes something you want to do because you realize the truth of what it is that you are in that process. It's an uplifting of consciousness. So it's profoundly acceptable. It's the same when we're trying to see our brother sinless, while still hanging on to the idea that there's such a thing as sin. That's impossible. It's impossible because God's will for us is perfect happiness because there is no sin. So how could we be happy when we see sin? When we see pain and suffering and death and lack and loss and limitation? How could there be happiness? Well, there couldn't be. But it means that because I can actually accept that there is no sin, that what my brother has done to me is not a sin. It's nothing happened. Likewise, what I've done to my brother is not a sin either. It's a dream. I may have made a mistake, and I accept that mistake because there's a karmic reaction to that, and I have to deal with that. But that's not the same as being punished for being sinful. And when I know I'm not being punished for being sinful, then I lose guilt. And it's the losing of the guilt that allows me to see clearly that mistakes don't need to be made. What we don't understand is we're making the mistakes out of guilt. When we're free from guilt, then things change. We don't do what we do out of need and false desire. So we have to come to the realization that there is no sin. Why is there no sin? Because there is only the will of God. There is only one will. I am under no laws but God's. And that means that there are no laws but God's. So how could there be sin? The idea that there is sin is the idea that there's something other than the reality that is God. Now, God is omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient being. In other words, God is everything. And how could there be anything outside of everything? And it's impossible for anything to be outside of everything. And it's certainly impossible for it to be an opposition to the will of God. Because if God's will is benignity and it's omnipresent, there simply is nothing else there except the idea, the suggestion. And it's that fools us. We hear from everywhere in this world, from every media, from other people, and even from our own minds, there's a suggestion that there's good and there's evil. That there's a power in conflict with the will of God. And it's only through faith and the miracle that we awaken to the realization this is simply just not true. There is just only suggestion. And when we actually listen to that suggestion, we create the appearances of good and evil, and they're just simply appearances. So we're hallucinating. And you know, it's a really strange thing, because it seems to be that when we're told that we're hallucinating, and this is really clearly said in the Course, that it seems that it's impossible that we could be looking at this world and seeing all the things that we see that are not true, that are not in line with the will of God, and that these are hallucinations. But it's not so difficult to see when you recognize very, very simply that hallucinations are what it is that we perceive because that's what we want. Even though at the time that we see it, we don't realize that's not what we want, but that's what the cause is. That's where it comes from, the desire within. Now, we're going down the road, we're driving the car, and we see a mirage in the road, don't we? We see water on a tarmac surface from the sunshine. And we just simply accept that as a mirage. That's nothing to worry about, nothing to be concerned about. You just drive your car straight on. But if you were to go into the desert, then you could see a mirage where there's a lagoon of water and palm trees all around and this oasis, which is just purely an hallucination. And as you go up to it, it disappears. And people have seen whole cities in the desert for the same thing. And this is no big mystical event that's taking place. It's purely perception in certain circumstances under certain conditions. But underneath all that is we're only ever seeing what we want to see. So that's the idea, that we have to change our mind about what it is that we want to see. If we want to see the real world, if we want to see the beauty and the perfection that is all around us, then our hearts have to be full of the desire for that, and we have to be dedicated to that. And the dedication comes from our understanding and acceptance and our absolute expression of what it is that the Course is teaching in its wonderful lessons. And if we have that dedication to give ourselves, to give our lives totally to the realization that there is no sin, if we're to become true metaphysicians, what we'll begin to see is that the only reason why we believe there is sin and evil in this world is because we've identified with this physical form, with this body. As we begin to allow ourselves to be released from the grievance, we will see that the grievance is holding on to this identity. As we become free from that, we will recognize that if that's not what we are, what is it that we actually are, allows to arise in our consciousness and show us that we are a different consciousness than this physical body level of consciousness. And that consciousness is the consciousness of Christ. It's not difficult to see that. It's not difficult to recognize that when it occurs. It comes gradually in the realization that the heart is opened. The heart is open to what's actually happening. Not only just what you're seeing, but the pain and the suffering that others are experiencing, because they're seeing that. And as your heart opens in compassion, you respond to their call for help, and no longer deceived by the appearance that call may take on as an attack. That's seen through. As you let go of the identification with the body, you begin to see you're losing your identification with the world. And there's a non-attachment taking place that allows you to separate out from what seems to be attack, but is really a call for help. And then you can respond to that call by giving what it is that you've gained in that upliftment of consciousness, which is the love of God and the forgiveness and the new perception based on the release from grievances, the new perception that sees that your brother is the Holy Son of God, that he is sinless, that there's no attack, and his call for help was a call for the love that he sees in you and you share with him, because you're both at one with God. And as you give that love and as you respond truly to his call, you open up more and more and awaken more and more to what it is that you really are as the Holy Son of God himself. And all that comes about through you allowing yourself to let go of grievances, to relinquish grievances. And this is a course in forgiveness. What else are you going to forgive? Thank you. Bless you for listening. Amen.
Amen.